continuing on with Cybersecurity is Dead, Why You Are the Weakest Link. We have technical architect from Sunrise Technologies, Mr. Christian Hart.
Hello, can everybody hear me? Good, okay, perfect. Thank you all for coming to my presentation. I really appreciate it. First, I'd like to thank you, SecCon, for giving me the opportunity to come here and speak at this conference, and also to Compass IT for sponsoring me. Today, we're going to talk about why you are killing cybersecurity, and we'll get to what I mean by that in just a minute. Okay, so a quick look at the agenda here. First, we'll do an introduction. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. Then we'll jump right into the presentation with the cybersecurity illusion and what that is. Then we'll take a look at a lot of current threats that are present in the cybersecurity world today. Then we'll really hit the focus of this speech and look at the human side of things. And finally, we'll conclude with some solutions. Sorry, the clicker's a little slow. That's it. Could you go to the next slide by any chance, please? Thank you. All right, so my name's Christian Hart. I'm a recent college grad where I studied computer science and cybersecurity, and I currently work at a smaller tech company that implements ERP solutions. My entire blurb's up there. I'm not gonna read all of that, but I really want to emphasize my goal and my hopes for this presentation is to bring a new and fresh perspective on one of the biggest issues in cybersecurity. Also, LinkedIn is there. If anybody would like to connect, feel free to do so, please. Next slide, please. All right, so the cybersecurity illusion, what is that? Thank you. Go back. Oh, it's not working. No. Oh, there we go. Okay, sorry about that. So the illusion here is, and it's not working again. Okay, there we go. Trusting technology too much. Don't get me wrong, staying up to date on the latest technology trends is very important, but we've become too reliant on technology. We've seen this huge trend of spending billions of more dollars every year on cybersecurity, especially when it comes to tech and tools. But it doesn't really seem to be combating the problem or helping solve the problem, right? Each year there's more breaches, there's more incidents, and the cost of recovering from all of those increases every year as well. Why is that? Well, the reason and the bottom line here is the tech and the tools are only as good as the people who operate and maintain them. Plain and simple. And that is the problem right there. At its core, it's a people problem. All right, so now we're going to take a look at a lot of current threats in the cybersecurity world today. Yeah. All right, first up is AI-enhanced phishing. Old school phishing was characterized by things like odd formatting, common misspellings, things that made it relatively easy for people to pick out with the naked eye. Unfortunately, with AI, phishing has taken on a new face, so to speak. For one, a lot of it's automated now, meaning it's a lot faster. It's also much better quality. We're not seeing those same errors and misspellings and things like that. And on that same point, we're seeing a lot of these attacks become more and more personalized. And keep that point in mind, because we'll come back to that later in the presentation. And there's a story I'd like to tell here. There's a client who I had done work with, and for reference, they had a pretty good phishing training program in place. It was quarterly, and there was follow-up training for employees who failed. Even with all of that, there was still an employee who fell victim to an AI phishing attack. For reference, this employee deals a lot with package tracking messages every day, things like that. And this AI phishing attack was specifically crafted to look like those everyday messages and specifically targeted to that employee. And what happened is the employee clicked on the link where they were taken to a fake Microsoft login portal. They entered their credentials. And thankfully, attackers weren't able to gain access because of MFA, but this just goes to show you how AI has really taken phishing up a notch. Next slide, please. All right, the next threat here is deepfakes and synthetic media. This one's a lot more recent. And for me personally, it's a lot scarier because in the past, seeing someone's face or hearing their voice was a way in which we would confirm their identity, right? Unfortunately, that's no longer true. Now, if anything, it's become a big liability. And there's an example here. There's a UK engineering firm who fell victim to a deepfake attack. And what happened is an employee was requested to join a conference call, nothing out of the ordinary. And when they joined, there was people on the call who looked like the company executives, who sounded like the company executives. Who would think otherwise, right? Unfortunately, it was not. It was deepfake impersonations. And they convinced the employee to transfer $25 million during the conference call. And what I really want to emphasize here is how easy it is to make deepfakes. At bare minimum, you need two things. First, an image of someone's face, which is relatively easy to get nowadays. And second, a short audio clip, maybe 15 to 20 seconds of somebody speaking. That's all it takes. Another example, the Elon Musk crypto videos. I laugh because I actually myself saw a lot of these. For those who haven't seen them, there was basically just a lot of AI-generated videos and live streams impersonating Musk that were pushing for fraudulent crypto investment schemes. In one case, a woman allegedly lost $60,000. And like I said, I myself saw a lot of these, and when I was scrolling through my feed the first time, I didn't think much of it, right? It looks legitimate, didn't think a lot about it. I saw it again, decided to actually watch the entire thing, look into it, and that's when I realized that it was fake. But it's kind of crazy to see the advancements that especially deepfake tech has made just in the last year or two. Next slide, please. All right, the next one here is insider threats. Now, there's really two sides to insider threats the way I think about it. We have the threat side and the risk side. The threat side being your malicious insider, disgruntled employee, things like that. But here I want to focus on the risk aspect. This is your unintentional insider, your employee who clicks on that phishing link, so to speak. And it's not on purpose, right? It's unintentional. The employee makes a mistake, is all it is. But unfortunately, because that happens, it is a very big risk. And there's an interesting stat here. 8% of users are responsible for 80% of human error-related breaches. And I don't know about any of you, but when I saw that, it really perked my ear. It was really interesting that such a small subgroup of users was responsible for an overwhelming majority of the breaches. Also keep that in mind, because we'll come back to that as well. And I really think that goes perfectly with this quote here. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you have the best security program in place, the best defense tools in place, because all it takes is for one person to make a mistake and bring everything crumbling down, so to speak. A perfect example of this is the MGM cyber attack. What happened here is attackers impersonated an MGM employee, called the IT help desk, and convinced the operator at the help desk to provide them with login credentials. They were able to gain access. It was a pretty big breach, ended up costing MGM a lot of money. And for reference, MGM had a decent security program in place, one of the better ones. But again, in this situation, it didn't matter. Next slide, please. All right, this is the big one, right? This is what everybody's talking about, is AI in the workplace. We've seen this massive trend of employees bringing AI into work and using it to do their job. And for the most part, this is a good thing, right? I mean, show of hands if you use AI at work and it's helped you, right? That's most of us. It's good. And thankfully, most of us know some of the side effects of it. However, a lot of users aren't aware of the negative effects. For example, first stat up there, not a lot of formal AI policy in place at a lot of companies. And there's several reasons for that. One being, it's kind of this trend we see a lot with new emerging tech. Regulations and policies are just slow to follow. Beyond that, a lot of workers and employees don't inform their supervisors that they use these tools, right? And this issue seems to be what a lot of CISOs are talking about, right? Is how do we manage AI in the workplace? How do we regulate it? And then also we do see a lot of employees also bringing in unsanctioned AI tools into the workplace, and this goes perfectly along with this idea of tech creep, employees bringing in unsanctioned tools into work. Next slide, please. And that brings us to shadow AI. Again, I mentioned this huge trend, AI in the workplace. It's massive, but organizations are still aware of still unaware, of almost 90% of AI usage in the workplace. Right, that's pretty scary. That needs to change. Kind of goes back to that security saying you can't protect what you don't know you have. And a lot of people are drawing a lot of similarities between shadow AI and shadow IT, and it makes sense, right? And in essence, they are the same issue, kind of, but the way those issues come about looks very different. For example, shadow IT was very much characterized by employees knowingly bringing in unsanctioned tech and tools. And while that can be the case with shadow AI, there's a much more concerning route that it's taking to really creep into the workplace without even the users or employees being aware of it. And I'll give you an example of what that looks like. For a moment, if we think about a lot of these bigger tech companies like Microsoft or Google, there's hundreds of thousands of people who use their products across various different industries. What we're seeing these bigger tech companies do is bake AI into a lot of their existing models, or products, And what that looks like from the user point of view is you have an employee who logs on one day at work, they boot up the same software, the same tool they've been using for months or maybe even years, but today when they go to log in, there's a little AI button in the corner, maybe a little AI agent, and more often than not, they get prompted to use it. So a lot of users go and jump at that opportunity without thinking twice about it. That is the much more concerning route there. Next slide, please. Thank you. So a little recap. We just took a look at a lot of current threats in cybersecurity today. And now we're going to look at the human side and really look at the root causes for a lot of these issues and a lot of these threats being so persistent. And the root of all of that is human psychology. So first, social engineering, right? Nothing new here. A lot of attackers have basic knowledge of foundational psychological mechanisms, and they use these to exploit people. There's a few here we're going to go through. First, authority. If we think back to the AI deepfake call example, that's a perfect story for this, right? People impersonating company executives. Puts a lot of pressure on employees to comply. Next one is urgency and scarcity. This is, a lot of us have seen this. It's your classic limited time offer, limited spots available, things like that. Last one here is familiarity. If we think back to the AI phishing slide and the point of more messages being personalized today, this goes perfectly with that, right? From a user point of view, if you receive a phishing attack or a message that has information in it that's familiar to you, you're more likely to trust it. That makes sense, but I want to take a deep dive on this point for a minute. There's a much more concerning aspect of this, and that's digital footprint. Today, a lot of users' digital footprint is growing bigger and bigger, and they're not aware of it. Therefore, when they receive a lot of these phishing attacks, a lot of these messages, there's information in there that's familiar to them, but they think it's privileged information, when in reality, it's not. It's publicly available, and it's not difficult to obtain, but again, they're not aware of that. Then that brings us to system 1 versus system 2 thinking. System 1 thinking refers to the part of our brain that's fast, automatic, very intuitive. It's responsible for making quick decisions on the fly. System 2 thinking is much more slow. It's much more deliberate. It's the part of the brain that's responsible for things like critical thought. And the story I'd like to tell here that happened actually to a friend of mine. For the purposes of this presentation, we'll call him Jim. And sadly, one day Jim lost his cat. And this prompted him and his wife to post on multiple community boards and online forums, things like that. And shortly after, Jim received a message from a stranger saying, "Hey, I have your cat, I'm at the vet right now." So Jim, being very excited and hopeful that somebody's found his lost cat, immediately replies saying, "Oh, perfect, thank you, could you just send some pictures?" So that he could confirm it was his cat. And to which the stranger replies, "Oh, no problem, could you just accept this Google Voice invite so I can do so?" And right there, Jim became suspicious. And after taking a minute to look into things, he realized it was a scam and that if he were to accept this invite, he'd be giving this stranger access to his Google account. Right, it's a classic example of emotional manipulation right there. And when Jim told me this story, I asked him, how did you do it, Jim? How did you go from being on this emotional high of somebody finding your lost cat to really pulling a 180 and questioning just everything that was going on? And he said the biggest thing he did is he stopped himself and slowed down for just a little bit to really think through what was happening. And that's kind of a big issue, right? A lot of users, us included, we move too fast sometimes. We're really bad at slowing ourselves down. All right, next one up is cognitive biases. These are basically false perceptions that our brain creates of relationships, patterns, connections, things like that. And there's a lot of reasons there on the infographic for why they come up, but one I want to focus on is what they call heuristics, which is really just a fancy word for mental shortcuts. And our brain uses these mental shortcuts to make quick decisions, right? Unfortunately, though, a lot of times, just having a quicker decision doesn't mean it's always the right decision. Again, that's system 1 and system 2 thinking. And there's some examples here. First one, optimism bias. This is that belief that it won't happen to me. Show of hands if you've ever been guilty of this. Yeah, I know I have. When I was a lot younger and phishing started to become more mainstream, you know, I heard about it, I'd seen examples, I knew what it was, but I just had this belief that it wouldn't happen to me, right? And my logic was, I've only seen this happen to people who work at big companies, people who live in big cities, people who are well known, and none of those applied to me, so I just didn't think it would ever happen. And of course, we all know that's just not true. It can happen to anybody. Next one's availability bias. This is our tendency to focus on widely reported threats. So for example, things like ransomware or phishing, if we think about it. And in doing so, that takes away a lot of our attention and focus from less reported threats, but ones that are equally, if not more dangerous. For example, something like deepfakes. Next one, there's confirmation bias. This is our tendency to accept information that aligns with previously held ideas or beliefs that we have. Got a great example for this one. Show of hands, who uses Amazon? Right, everybody, we love Amazon. So say one day, you're shopping on Amazon, you buy something, right? And shortly after, maybe the next day or something, you receive an email saying, hello, XYZ, whoever. Unfortunately, there was an issue with shipping related to your package. Can you please click here to contact customer support so we can ensure that your package gets delivered to you on time? Now think to yourselves for a second, what would you do in that situation, right? Hopefully all of us are on the right track, but my point here is most users are gonna just immediately click on that link, right? They make the connection that they had previously bought a package, therefore this message has to relate to that, and therefore it must be trustworthy. They don't take time to, again, stop themselves and slow down and think about things. For example, here things like, is there an order number on this message that matches the order number from when I originally ordered the package? That's a good way of checking. Next slide, please. Security fatigue. This is a big one. This is this concept of being extremely tired, exhausted, and oftentimes frustrated from having to follow security procedures or comply with policies, right? And it happens to all of us, right? This stuff has gotten pretty complicated. It can be very tedious at times. And unfortunately, this increase in complexity leads to a lot of complacency. And what I mean by complacency here, for context, it's this sort of this belief that the system will handle it, right? As tech especially is becoming more and more complex, users understand it less and less, becomes more of a black box to them, right? And as that black box gets bigger and bigger, they sort of take on this belief that it just handles everything and they don't have to worry about security. And again, that's just not true. Quick story here, there's an Uber data breach in 2022. Basically what happened here is an Uber driver was convinced by an attacker to accept an MFA request, and in doing so, they gained access to their account and allegedly also gained access to Uber's bug bounty reports, which usually contains a list of unpatched security vulnerabilities. And I really like that example because it involves MFA, right? And MFA is great, and I know a lot of people that aren't in cybersecurity, and they view MFA as sort of this security blanket that you throw on your account and it just blocks every attack vector. And we all know that's not true. It's really just an added layer of protection. While it's great, it doesn't cover all the bases. There's still ways attackers can get around it. And a lot of this really feeds into this bigger issue that users don't care, right? I'm sure we've all had to experience this before. A lot of users aren't in the security business. They're in the finance business or the real estate business or something like that. Security is not their job. They don't want to have to deal with it. For them, security is really just a hurdle that they have to jump while going about their workday. Next slide, please. So it leads me to this question. Can we patch human error? Well, no, we can't. Right? We're humans, we make mistakes. It's just how it is. There's a quote here by Don Norman that I really like. Basically says, we don't make mistakes because we're stupid. We make mistakes because we're human. Again, nobody's perfect. Show of hands. Who here has not made a mistake in their career? Right? Nobody's hands are raised, right? We all do it. We're human. It happens. And we're too focused on the issue of people making mistakes because they're stupid or they're not taking their job seriously, whatever it may be, when we really need to be focused on the issue of the current systems in place aren't designed for how humans behave. So a little recap there. We took a look at a lot of psychological foundational reasons that's really at the root cause of a lot of issues and persistent threats in cybersecurity. Now we're going to talk about some solutions. So first up, and arguably the most difficult one here, is building a culture of security. Right, I mentioned before how users, there's this big issue, a lot of them don't care. Well, how do we get them to care? Well, we get them to care by turning security into a business conversation. And again, I want to emphasize here that technology and training are great, right? Like, they're still very much needed, but it's only part of the solution. So, what does turning security into a business conversation look like? Well, I got 2 questions up here on the board that we're going to walk through together, and I'm going to tell you my answer to them. But first, I would like each of you to take a few seconds to think about to yourselves how you would answer this. So first up, how would you get a CEO to care about security? Take a few seconds to think about that. All right, so my answer for this one is we need to speak in their language, right? We need to be bilingual, so to speak. We need to bridge the gap between security and business and be fluent in both of those aspects. And what does that look like? Speaking in terms of finances, reputation, legal risk. Explaining what a breach would cost in terms of lost revenue, customer trust, and regulatory fines. Aligning security investments with business outcomes is the way to do it. Also, another good point to note here is demonstrate the ROI on security, right? Demonstrate how, or explain how spending money now on things like tools and training can save a lot of money down the road when it comes to things like instant response and breach recovery. All right, next question, we'll do the same thing here. How would you get an average employee to care about security? Think about that one for a few seconds. So my answer for this one is make it personal, right? Again, I mentioned how a lot of users don't care about security. We need to, again, make it personal. And what does that look like? Well, a lot of users I've seen have this kind of perception that when they're at work, they're not really at risk. They don't really feel like they're at risk, right? They feel like they're behind this wall of the company they're working for. So explaining to them that that's not true, that it's not just the company who's at risk, it's them. It's their information, their identity. And that's not to scare them, right? It's just to make them aware. Another good point here is storytelling. Short little anecdotes and things like that are great, right? A lot of employees, a lot of people are going to remember stories better than they're going to remember a long list of abstract rules and things like that. Next slide, please. All right, next one here, human-centric design. I previously mentioned how a lot of current systems aren't designed for how humans behave. That needs to change. We need systems that first and foremost assume mistakes, right? Because let's face it, with a lot of users, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Next point there is build in friction. I got a great example of what this would look like. A lot of us have probably seen when you're at work and you go to send an email to somebody outside of your organization. You get met with a little pop-up saying, oh, are you sure you want to send this? It's outside the company. Don't share sensitive information, things like that. While it seems like that's really trivial and just kind of annoying, it can be quite impactful sometimes, because what does it do? Again, we think back to system 2. It slows the user down. It forces them to have a moment of conscious thought and really think about what they're doing and the information they're including in that email. Last one here is adaptive learning. If we think back to that statistic I mentioned earlier with that 8% of users being responsible for 80% of the human error breaches, this could be perfect for that, right? If the systems can be adaptive and learn based on the user or based on a group of users. For example, that 8%, maybe they need more checks in place or more monitoring to help, since they tend to make more mistakes. And really the whole idea of this design is they need to function as safety nets. Similar to how safety nets function for trapeze artists, right? Should allow the user to go about their day, do their job, perform their tasks, but when they make a mistake and fall, so to speak, there's safety nets in place to catch them and prevent harm or damage. And the last point here I want to talk about is zero trust models. I'm not going to get too much into this. You know, it's a really big topic, could have its entire presentation on its own, but what I want to emphasize here is it's not just a network architecture, it's a mindset, and one that I think would work perfectly for this sort of design. And you know, what is zero trust? It's really those 5 pillars, right? I don't trust the user, I don't trust the device, I don't trust the application, I don't trust the network, and I don't trust the data. All 5 of those, I don't trust, I don't trust. Not trusting and always having to verify is a good mindset to have. All right, incident-driven training. Simply put, old school training's not enough. It's not working. These annual, twice a year, hour-long security seminars are not cutting it, right? And one of the reasons, we're humans. We don't have the attention span to sit through hour-long trainings. It can be a lot. We need a more modern approach, right? We need something that is both immediate and consumable. And I'll give you an example of what this could look like. You know, we'll keep it simple. We'll stick to phishing. So you have phishing tests at your company. Employee fails the test. What happens? They're immediately met with a pop-up or a video or a simulation explaining why what they did was wrong, what they could have looked out for in that specific example, and what they can look out for in the future. And again, right there, it's immediate. It's right as they make the mistake. There's no delay at all. They're not getting training 2 weeks later on the matter. And also consumable, right? Make it 5, 10, 15 minutes long. It should be very short and digestible for us, right? Because humans, we don't have a big attention span. We just don't. And the reason this model works so well is right back to human psychology, behavior change. I'd like all of us to take a few seconds and think back to a time when we were all little kids, right? And our parents or guardians caught us doing something that we shouldn't have done, right? We probably got scolded for it, right? Now, say your parent was in the middle of something, though, on the phone with a friend, on their computer working. Did they wait till they were finished what they were doing to scold you? Did they wait till the end of the day when they had nothing else to do? Probably not. They probably scolded you right then and there in the moment because, again, behavior change happens best in the moment, that immediate nature of it. It's the same idea with those orange glowing stoves when we're all kids, right? Looks really cool, we want to go touch it, but when we do, we find out immediately why it's not a good idea. And even though this model's great, there are a lot of considerations to have, right? First, what does this mean for the business? Well, it means it's probably going to disrupt the workflow of a lot of employees, right? That this is going to be a big change that employees are going to have to adapt to and get used to. Next, do you need to staff somebody for this, to be able to monitor this and provide the training? Or could you maybe automate it with AI? Some things to consider. And the last solution here is simplicity, right? The problem here is we've made security a feature, not a function. And for example, a lot of vendors add a lot of features onto their tools because they believe it makes it more valuable. And while that may be true, it makes things unnecessarily complicated, right? And we as consumers love features, right? Just think about it. Most of us nowadays want the new car that has all the bells and whistles. But the result of this is security is seen as that way, right? Incredibly complex. It's just this big, intimidating roadblock. It's not seen as a seamless, helpful layer of protection. And I know that's kind of ambitious, but that should be the goal, right? Security should be as seamless as possible. So the solution here is simplify and educate. And those two go hand in hand, right? When we simplify things like our technology and our procedures, it makes educating people on them a lot easier. And I know this has been kind of a long presentation, but two things I really want to focus on and hammer home. If you leave here with nothing else but these two things, it's this. First, it's a people problem, right? That's a big part of cybersecurity is people. And at the root cause of all that, it's a lot of psychological reasons. And two, here, the biggest thing we can do to help combat this issue is simplify and educate. And that concludes the presentation. Thank you all so much. There's my LinkedIn if you missed it at the beginning of the presentation, and now we'll have some time for Q&A, I believe.
Yeah, if you have any questions, just raise your hand.
Hi there. One issue we sometimes see is when we've done phishing assessments in the past, clients, leadership on the client side will, especially if they don't have a formal security team and they're a smaller client, they'll take an attitude toward, we should punish this employee. Like, who was this specific employee who failed the phishing test? Because we want to make sure it's not acceptable. And how would you say is a good way to discourage that mindset and instead encourage a learning one?
Great question. Thank you very much. I would say to combat that is provide some numbers, right? There's been a lot of studies that show that really two main things happen when employees don't feel like they'll be harshly punished for making mistakes. And you can look at the researches on this. First and foremost, they're much more likely to report issues or mistakes that they make to their supervisor. And two, they're just much less likely to make those mistakes in the first place. So I think researching on that and really telling them, hey, if you care about longevity, this is what we can do now to help fix this in the future.
All right, I think that.
Hi, so you were talking about getting employees to care about security and taking security seriously. In your experience, what were the most successful incentives to achieving that goal?
Great question, thank you. I kind of mentioned them. I will focus more on the employee side for this. My biggest success is, again, making them aware of what's at stake in a way that's not scaring them, right? I kind of mentioned that because we don't want to scare them. We just want to make them aware. A lot of them just don't realize what's at stake, like that, their identity and their information. And the biggest success I had is really making it personal again and letting them know that we're doing this for you. It's not just the company that we're trying to protect, it's also the employees, the user. Does that answer your question? Oh, sorry.
So talking about deep fakes, what is there like any like signs to recognize a deep fake that we could like, because a lot of employees, they may not know what they are, especially on the other sides of business that aren't technology. What are kind of the key things to tell them to look out for?
Yeah, great question. Things I've really noticed in my experience with them is facial expressions is a big one, right? The tone that the audio is coming across as, or just whatever way they're speaking, their facial expressions won't really match, or they'll stay consistent, or really just not seem natural. I'm sure we've experienced that a lot. That's a good way to look out for it with the eye, but also there's a lot of tech, for example, deepware, that can be very helpful in technically recognizing deepfakes.
Thank you, Christian. This is a very important talk. We've all received bogus emails that we don't trust. What's the best way to avoid? I know I would put my cursor over the URL. You could tell it wasn't from where it was supposed to. Is that one way, or is there a better way of making sure we don't click on the wrong email? I know we've all get these bogus ones, or these ones we don't trust.
Yeah, great question. I will agree with you. I've used that technique, and that is a good way I've used to make sure that it's coming from where it's actually coming from. In terms of how to make sure, I'm not super aware of a lot of technology out there. I'm very passionate about training, especially with phishing. Training is huge for employees, and things to look out for. Again, the one you mentioned is good. Also, timing. Timing's a big one. If you're receiving, now this doesn't happen a lot, of course, but if you're receiving an email after hours or things like that, that's suspicious, right? Things like that.
So I know we've been talking a lot about, gaining that awareness and all that, being able to use a combination of education and tooling. When it comes to AI tool usage, because you mentioned that this tech creep problem is definitely something we're all concerned with. Are you aware of any tools or anything that can help a CISO get better awareness about the AI solutions that are being used by their employees? I know we've used CASBs in the past, but is there something different now that you're aware of?
Yes, I recently heard about Pangea.cloud, which it's really cool tech, allows you to see, it gives you visibility about AI usage among all your employees. So that way, from a CISO standpoint, you can see exactly what employees are using what AI tools and things like that.
Just to back you up on your presentation here, several years ago had an opportunity with a company I used to work with. We had a problem with no matter how much education we did, we could not get users to pick good passwords. So we designed a simple solution where they had to go to a specific URL to change their password. And as they typed in their new password, it would run the calculation on how long it would take to brute force that password. And it would give them feedback right then. If you pick this password, you're going to have to change it again in a week. And as they interfaced with that and they watched as they changed the length and complexity of their password, eventually they hit a point where, oh, you won't have to change this for 2 years. And they just, over time, with that immediate feedback and training, started picking stronger passwords. So simplicity, immediate feedback, I agree.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, this is a great talk, and had a question because it seems like we're talking about security in the workplace, but if you have an organization that has it so you can bring your own device to work, shouldn't there be something implemented to talk about security at the home as well? Because if someone infects you at your home and then they have some a remote code execution on your phone, you take that phone to your workplace, isn't there a chance that you could get infected at your job just by doing something outside of your work environment?
Yes, that is a good point. I didn't focus on that in this presentation, but yes, that is a really good point. BYOD is, I've seen it become a big issue at a lot of places. I'm sure we all have. So yeah, that's a great point. that I didn't focus on that for this presentation, but that is very much an equally as important problem.
I think that concludes the talk. Thank you.
Thank you all so much.